Yeah, like I feel like it's just a power trip at this point, and I don't think it's actually serving her a benefit. I don't think that there's a number of people who are thinking, okay, yeah, this is really important to me, whether they understand trans people in general or not. I don't think this is something that's on the top of people's minds, other than, like I say, this really small group of people who are very loud, who I'm not even sure are voting for her, which is pretty sad.
Yeah, love it. Thanks
Okay,
for
well,
I'm glad we did it.
yeah, no kidding. Okay, I'll kind of give like a short intro, just like we just started talking. Okay, so Janis, thank you so much for being here. You're probably the number one person in Alberta that I've wanted to speak with because I think you're one of the best advocates that we have in the province. Everybody talks about you, everybody knows you, and I only hear good things. So, um,
Love
you
that.
know, you're the one person I wanted to talk to, and I think mostly everybody knows you, but introduce yourself, when you got into politics and why.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Cole. Sorry it took us a while to connect, but we did it. Yeah, so my journey to politics wasn't like a planned one. I've shared this story a lot. I was a teacher in rural Alberta, and I still remember when I started teaching at Balf School in the village of Balf, population 200. I remember walking down the school hallway and just seeing like all the teachers that had taught there their whole careers, and I thought, cool, maybe my photo is going to be on that wall one day. And of course, life did not have that plan for me to be a teacher my whole career. But long story short, I taught for a few years in rural Alberta, and then I took a job working on curriculum with the government. And the plan was that I would work for 3 years in Edmonton, and then I would go back to my rural school division. But again, plan didn't quite work out that way. I ended up taking a permanent job with the government and stayed in Edmonton. And so being back in Edmonton, I hadn't been in Edmonton since I was doing my undergrad. So I'd been away for a number of years and I didn't know a lot of people. And really, I just kind of searched for community. And so that led me to starting to volunteer with the NDP. One thing kind of led to the next. I got really involved with the federal NDP in my area and ran for office for the first time well, I launched my campaign in 2013 for the 2015 federal elections. So, I've been now in politics for over a decade, and of course, I wasn't successful in that federal run, but stayed involved and ran again provincially in 2019, and I've been elected ever since. So that marks about 6.5 years as an MLA here in Alberta.
So you were previously a teacher, and over the last couple of weeks, obviously, education has been the hot topic. What has that felt like, and what was education like when you left it? Was it similar to how it was, or how we're talking about it today, that, overcrowded classrooms and complexity, or has it gotten much worse since then? What do you sort of feel has changed since you left teaching?
Yeah, I was this is now, gosh, this makes me sound old, but this is now over 15 years ago. I think I left in 2010. So it's been a while. And so things, even in that time period, things have certainly shifted in education. And I also had, the luxury of being in rural schools where we had decent class sizes and fairly good supports for kids, but that has certainly shifted. And since my time as an MLA, I've only ever been an opposition MLA, of course, but I've had the chance to, talk with so many teachers and visit so many schools in all corners of the province. And things have certainly shifted and not for the better.
Um, I think people were shocked at I would think the Alberta government, the UCP, I feel like they were shocked by the response from the public about how they handled the teacher strike. Did you expect that? Did you think that people would be as outraged as they were, or was it kind of surprising to you? Because in my view, it felt somewhat surprising to me, just always, living in Alberta, like the stereotypical, oh, everybody's a diehard conservative, they're just going to go with whatever this government wants. But it really seems like the thing that might actually break them.
Yeah, and you know what? I wondered because, of course, I'm in this. Some would say an orange bubble, although that's certainly not true anymore. But at least in my area, and of course throughout Edmonton, we're all represented by the NDP. And so, I wondered, okay, Janice, go beyond your bubble a little bit. And I had the chance to talk to teachers at the rallies from my hometown of Barhead, from small towns all over the province that had come into some of the rallies. And I would ask them all, like, what's the support like out there? I know you live in a very conservative community. And overwhelmingly, they said that it was pretty great, that, a lot of Albertans were supporting them. And so I think it's twofold. I think the first piece that's really motivated Albertans is the fact that everybody has a connection to education, right? So
Right.
whether you have a child or a grandchild or a niece, whatever it might be, you've got some connection, whether they're a student or a teacher, right? There's so many connections to education, no matter where you are in this province. And then I think the second piece is about our charter rights. So, there's a lot of folks on the right that would call themselves libertarian that would say there's no reason that the government should be, overruling teachers' charter rights here, right? What are we headed towards when the government is so willing to use the notwithstanding clause to, to overrule their rights? And so I think it's two factors there: the importance of education for so many Albertans, regardless of their partisanship or lack thereof, and the basic idea of human rights, and the fact that Canadians overwhelmingly support the charter, and it's something that we should be proud of.
Do you think the UCP is regretting how they handled it? Like, I mean, you're in the legislature and maybe you talked to some of the MLAs or not. I don't know if you cross paths with them, but do you think there's a level of regret from the UCP and how they went about it?
Yeah, I mean, I really do think, and especially in those areas of Alberta where, those MLAs didn't get an overwhelming majority, that it was tooth and nail, that they barely, beat out the NDP. An example is Calgary Bow. I mean, what a great example of where an MLA minister, in this case Nicolaides, he hardly won that riding, and so he knows that there was a lot of NDP support there to begin with, and of course now there's recall legislation up against him. But I know, I mean, obviously he's the minister, so that piece aside, but I know he's getting inundated by his constituents because we as NDP MLAs often get CC'd on a lot of those emails as well. And me, as someone who is speaking out in support of teachers and against Bill 2, my office has just been absolutely flooded over the last while. A lot of it positive, but then we're CC'd as well on some of the critical emails to those UCP MLAs. So I think they're absolutely feeling it, Cole.
Um, what's your opinion on the recalls? How do you feel about it? I have mixed emotions on how, like, I'm not sure I support the legislation to begin with, like when it was originally introduced, but there is a piece of me that's like hopeful that some of the UCP able to be successful with some of them. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, and it's challenging when you listen to that the Minister of Education, for instance, kind of speak around it and say, well, this wasn't what it was intended for, and then he's been kind of pressed by journalists about, well, what was it intended for, and there's not a lot of clarity there, right? He's like, well, it wasn't really written exactly, he's like, it's for MLAs who've done criminal acts, that sort of thing. Well, that wasn't the spirit of your bill. So you're backtracking a lot here. I do believe very much in the democratic process, right, of elections. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that this is something that the UCP fought for, that they wanted to bring in. And so, as our leader has said multiple times, they're kind of in the find out stage, right? Sorry, I am going to have some cat interruptions
That's
here.
okay.
They've decided that they're going to fight behind me, oregano and basil. Sorry about that, Cole. I should have warned you, but I guess our
All
viewers
good.
our viewers know that there's a lot happening in the Janis oregano basil residence. Boys, could you keep it down because I am on a podcast here, so you can see there's a bit of a standoff going on
Your
right now.
cat
So
fight.
yeah, I often show the lovey-dovey side of things, so folks are getting the exclusive.
This is going to make for great content,
They're
Janice.
getting the exclusive show here that not everything's what it looks like on social media, as we now have a bit of a full-on brawl happening. So,
Yeah.
anyways, so yeah, I mean, like I said, they're in the find out stage right now, and it's pretty interesting to just see how many Albertans are rising up, right? And so one of the things that, and sorry, you're the one asking the questions, but I'm just going to jump right in and direct the conversation, because the piece that's connected to recall is just the fact that so many Albertans are getting engaged and getting involved, right? And I think what's been cool for me is having all these new volunteers express an interest in getting out and getting involved. And so I love to see that energy harnessed in really productive ways. And for me as an MLA here in Edmonton and an MLA who wants to help build across the province, getting new people involved, people who've never been partisan before, who've never held a party membership, who've never knocked on a door, are getting engaged. And, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think it's wild. Like since I moved, I've only lived in Alberta for 3 years, and when I first moved here, I remember just watching politics, and it was very much like all conservative voices everywhere you looked. It was just, pro conservative messaging. And there was never really anybody speaking up on behalf of, the more progressive voices or trying to take the province in a different direction. Everybody just sort of agreed with what the conservatives were saying and nobody challenged them. I think because there's like some fear that, oh, they're too big to talk about. We can't really be too hard on them because they have this huge power in this province. But then I started talking about politics online, and many other people did too. And I realized that now more and more people are sort of I like coming out from the shadows, and
Yeah.
being like, okay, now I'm ready to talk about it too. I'm unhappy here as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's that power in the numbers and people speaking up and being like, I've had enough. When I was talking about municipal politics, I mean, we're talking about videos getting 300,000 views for an Edmonton municipal election. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like that's pretty substantial. That, paints a picture of how many people are actually interested in what is going on in this province, which I think is a good thing. But I don't think it's a good thing for the UCP.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, when you are inspiring might not be the right word, but when you're inspiring folks to get involved with the NDP for the first time, just because of how horrendous your record has been, I mean, they may need to start questioning that, right? But like I said, in the interim, I'm going to just keep trying to capitalize on that. We had a day of action yesterday across the province where New Democrats and in every corner of Alberta went out and knocked on doors. And in my area alone, I think I had 6 new volunteers, people who'd never canvassed before. So it's pretty inspiring to see, and we just got to keep that momentum going.
I see like a lot of young people, even on TikTok and Instagram, that are starting to post political things, and I think that's good. Have you noticed that with the volunteers that there's been a lot more younger people getting involved?
Yeah, and that was a cool thing that happened yesterday too. Is I had someone who'd again never been involved, and she's 20 years old, and she had reached out to my office asking what she could do, and I love that. I mean, maybe it's the social studies teacher in me who believes so much in active, engaged citizenship, right? And so when young people are reaching out and asking how they can help, it's incredible. And
I'm
I'm
listening to
sorry.
the cats in the background.
I know I did not raise them very well. Clearly, oregano. Can you just not do that? Okay, we're just gonna get a little bit of an oregano appearance because that'll keep them away from basil. So, well,
Ugh.
it's the other way around, but
Yeah. I saw you shared some posts too about the Mamdani in New York. Like, I mean, becoming the mayor. Is there anything that from him that's kind of like inspired you a little bit going forward? Like, what have you taken from his campaign that you think, well, you'll maybe try and rope into your politics or the Alberta NDP?
yeah, it's interesting, and I know you follow politics closely, obviously. A lot of like the platform side of things that Mamdani campaigned on, we're not talking like far left. I mean, a lot of these ideas around healthcare and transit and just really having a people before profits kind of model is not extreme for us in Canada when we're talking about the left and New Democrats, right? But I think for me, what his campaign just really solidified, and I mean, I feel like I've always sort of tried to do this myself, but politics ultimately is about people, right? It ultimately is about relationships and connecting with folks, right? And I just think there's so much power in that for people to know that they're being heard and to know that there's somebody who's willing to fight for them in not just words but in actions as well, right? Because it's hard these days. I get it. People are cynical. People are cynical about politics. They're cynical about politicians. And so I think when we see someone who's in it for the right reasons, it's inspiring, and it inspired a lot of us, that win.
It's wild to me watching the political landscape in the US and how things are unfolding. But one thing about Mom Donnie's campaign, which I just, it always brings back, like, he never really threw anybody under the bus in order to win. And I feel like that's almost unheard of. Even here, like, we've seen the UCP, they seem to throw trans people under the bus every opportunity they can get to win this, like, really small percentage of sort of this fringe group of Albertans who are really concerned about these issues. But it's such a small group of people, and I'm not even sure that they're voting for the UCP. They're probably voting for the new Republican Party at this point.
Yeah,
What do
and I think
you make of that? Like, where how do we are they do they believe that this is popular?
well, and I think I really do love that you use the example of trans folks because that's just one of the pieces of Mom Donnie's campaign that was just really wonderful to see, right? He was unequivocally pro trans rights, right? And for him it was about um the universality of uplifting everyone, right? And
Yeah.
he wasn't fearful about that, right? Because he knew it was supporting trans folks is doing the right thing, right? Because again, bringing it back to people. And so, yeah, I just like I said, I think one of the things we need to do here in Canada too is just acknowledge that we do have some of these people here too, right? And I think we've got examples with a number of our leaders who really are pushing. But you're right. Here in Alberta, what we're seeing this continued attack on the most vulnerable, and we're seeing that with Danielle Smith, and the same Danielle Smith who not that many years ago talked about supporting the trans and non-binary people in her life, right? And is on the record many times talking about live and let live. This very libertarian mindset, and that's shifted for her. And I've asked her before in the legislature, what's changed, right? What's changed for you, Danielle? And she of course isn't able to articulate it, but we know what's changed, right? That she's willing to trample the rights of minority to satisfy what she thinks is part of her base. But as you pointed out, Cole, are those folks even voting for her?
Yeah, like, I feel like it's just a power trip at this point, and I don't think it's actually serving her a benefit. I don't think that there's a number of people who are thinking, okay, yeah, this is really important to me, whether they understand trans people in general or not. I don't think this is something that's on the top of people's minds, other than, like I say, this really small group of people who are very loud, who I'm not even sure are voting for her, which is pretty sad. So tomorrow, we're hearing that they're going to use the notwithstanding clause on three separate bills that they passed previously, and I'm assuming they're going to wrap that all into one bill now. And so explain what you've heard and how that's going to work.
Yeah, so a full disclosure, you likely know as much as I do at this point. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of answers other than knowing what has been signaled already, and I think the bill is protecting Alberta's Children's Statutes Amendment Act or something, and so that's our best guess because it has already been signaled that she's willing to use the notwithstanding clause on the anti-trans bills. So we'll know more this time tomorrow. We absolutely will. But at this point, we're going to push back, just like we did with Bill 2 and the ramming through of that bill, where the teachers' rights were attacked. So yeah, I really had hoped that that the premier had taken a step back and looked and did some soul searching, but of course that's naive to think that she would do that. So I hope I'm wrong tomorrow, and I hope that that's not what that bill is. But all signs point to, unfortunately, yeah, likely using the notwithstanding clause towards all three previous anti-trans bills.
And people ask me this all the time, and I never know the answer to give them. How do they fight back against things like this? We often hear, well, you just go to the ballot box, and people are like, hey, I want more than that. I want to do more than that. What would your advice be to the people who are ready to fight back against things like this?
Yeah, and I love that question because I know it can feel for a lot of Albertans because I hear from people every single day, as you know, and it can feel hard to have hope in times like this, you know, especially when it's your community being attacked, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a member of the trans community, whatever it might be. And so to give folks something tangible, I think is really important. And, you know, from a partisan sense, I really encourage people like we did yesterday, come out, knock on doors, even if you've never done it before, even if you're scared to do it, you'll have people around you, you'll never be alone. That's a good way, because what do we do by door knocking? We collect data, right? We reach people that we've never reached before, and you know, we're able to talk about the NDP. And for me, it's been a lot of this last week over constituency break. It's a lot of like, hey, it's not about me. I want to hear from you. You know, we haven't been in the legislature this past week. What issues are top of mind for you, so that I can go back to the legislature next week and bring those concerns forward. And so for me, that's an important part of my job. Even if they don't support me and I might not want to hear their feedback, you know, I'm still their MLA, whether they vote for me or not, right? So knocking on doors is a big one. Getting involved in the party, right? Joining the party. I had a couple people yesterday say I've never joined a party before, but it's time, right? So those are seemingly small steps, but they're big steps for someone who's never been politically engaged before. And when it comes to specifically for the attack on trans rights, I love directing people to Trans Rights YAG, which is one group of folks on Instagram in particular that give a lot of kind of examples of calls to action. And most recently, they've just talked about what's likely coming with Bill 9 and the use of the notwithstanding clause, and just encouraging people to be, you know, active allies. It's Trans Awareness Week, right? And their point is we need more than awareness, right? We need action. So showing up at rallies, speaking out loudly in support. If you're not a trans person yourself, being there for folks who might not be able to, you know, use their own voices or to amplify their voices, right? Calling people in when you see transphobia, right? When you see attacks on the trans community, calling people in, and oftentimes I try to respond with education, right? If someone is misgendering me or and perhaps not intentionally, like, hey, let's talk about this. Obviously, when there's transphobia that I see on like social media or whatnot, I try to block people immediately. But I just think I'm rambling here now, Cole. But I think there are a lot of actions that we can be taking specific to that. But like I said, getting involved and pushing back, because there are a lot of people who are like, okay, I'll share a post on Instagram, but what else can I do, right? And it's that what else that we need to be moving towards too.
What are you? I mean, you knock doors obviously in your community, but I see you're out knocking doors all over the place. Sometimes down in Calgary.
Mhm.
What's the general feeling like? What are people saying at the doors to you lately? What are their biggest concerns?
Yeah, and that's always my question, whether I'm door knocking in Edmonton Highlands, Norwood, or South Calgary, where I've spent a lot of time door knocking. Just, yeah, what are your top concerns? And overwhelmingly, you won't be surprised to hear this, Cole: education, healthcare, general affordability, right? Whether it's the cost of utilities, cost of groceries, those sorts of things, cost of rent, right? And then there's usually a few other issues like CPP came up on the doors for us yesterday a little bit. So protecting our pensions, housing, safety, right? Depending on where I'm door knocking in my area, just safety comes up a fair bit, and around that kind of the housing angle on that too, right? Like, I'm seeing a lot of unhoused folks. I really wish we had more investments in affordable housing, those kinds of things. But yeah, I mean, to your previous point, you ask people what their top issues are on the doors, and people aren't saying, I really think we need to go after the rights of transgender people, right? Like, no one's,
Nobody's saying that.
right?
Nobody's
People
saying
are
that.
just trying to get by. A lot of folks, I represent one of the lowest income ridings in the province. A lot of folks are just really trying to figure out how to make ends meet each and every day, right? The lowest concern on their list is the rights of people who aren't bothering them whatsoever.
Well, and it boggles my mind. Like, if you look at the cost of car insurance, it is through the roof. Heating and electricity, they're saying could double this winter for people come January. There's nothing in this sitting that's looking to address any of that. At the like the UCP is not addressing any of that in this sitting. So I think people have to really start asking some questions about what the priorities are here, because I looked into buying a new car and the insurance would be more than the car payment in some cases. So it's just outrageous. It has the is the NDP starting to come up with policies that they're going to be putting forward, saying this is what we're going to do should we
Yeah.
win the next election?
Yeah, and you're seeing that already a bit with, because as you know, and I'm not making excuses, it's just the reality. When we're in the legislature, we have very few like legislative tools we can use because people are always like, well, why don't you do a bill about this, or why don't you, my favorite question is like, why aren't you pushing for a vote of non-confidence? And it's just like, oh gosh, I wish that were an option. So, lots of times you have to do that educating. But as far as it goes with introducing bills, I mean, we have access to private members' bills, which is one of our really only tools to put forward concrete legislation. Spoiler alert here, how many of our private members' bills over the last 6 years do you think the UCP have supported?
Probably none.
Yeah, and you would be correct on that. I had my first experience, would be almost 2 years ago now, with my bill on rent caps, Bill 205. And I talked to so many folks. I met with various stakeholders, people who were in support, people who weren't. You come forward with, well thought out legislation, and the government won't even, they won't even hear you out on it. And it's frustrating. But, one of the pieces that we've just put forward, Kathleen Ganley is leading on this one, minimum wage. And, Alberta has the lowest minimum wage in Canada, right? Even conservative Saskatchewan now has a higher minimum wage, right? So that's a piece of like concrete policy that we've put forward. And in that bill as well are tip protections for those working in the service industry, as well as eliminating the youth minimum wage, right? So some concrete policy there for sure, and that's what we're doing actually right now. We're really collecting this feedback. We've got folks like Dr. Luann Metz, who's a world-renowned healthcare professional. Gosh, I won't even get all her credentials right, but someone who's well regarded for her work in healthcare. She's really having conversations all around the province about how do we fix healthcare, right? Because what a mess that we will inherit.
90 days, Janice. 90 days.
Right? Yeah. The UCP have not been able to fix it. I'm shocked. Adding 3 more ministers and a whole lot of more red tape hasn't solved healthcare. Anyways, we'll give them 90 more days. But that's going to be a really challenging piece to tackle. And so having these conversations now, we don't know when the next election will be for sure. Of course, it's planned for October of 2027, but that can change. And so we have to be prepared now.
Yeah. What is the best advice you've received as a when you're getting into politics or throughout your career in politics? What's the best advice that you've received, or have you received much advice from anyone else?
That's a good question, Cole. Let me think. The best advice.
Because I feel like you're when we talk about Alberta politics, people often bring your name up and they say, well, Janice is a great politician because she really, she sticks to her values. She's not switching sides all the time on issues. She really kind of goes with her heart and what she feels is right. And people, I think, respect that. They see that as somebody who's willing to stand by what they believe in. So I was just wondering if there's somebody who sort of taught you along or gave you some advice early on that you've always kind of thought about.
Yeah, of course I'm on the spot here and I'm drawing a blank, but I'll think on this, Cole. But I can think, I am often asked to give advice, especially to new politicians or folks who are thinking of running for office. I've done a lot of women and gender diverse folks in politics, those kinds of conversations. And one of my pieces of advice is, and I have to heed it myself, is don't always do what Janis Irwin does because, for instance, things like, don't read the comments, don't do your own social media, try to have a thick skin. I'm not always the best at that, right? So I take on a lot and I do a lot. But one thing that I'm getting better at, Cole, and some people will be shocked to hear this, is trying to say no, because it's very easy to just want to do everything, right? I want to be there for all my constituents. I want to be there for every group that reaches out and wants to meet, and for every person who wants a phone call and to talk, but I can't, right? And I've had to kind of accept that, you can't do everything. It's okay to say no, right? It's okay to have some boundaries. So that is not advice from anyone else at all. It's just me having a bit of a therapy session with you today, saying that I'm trying to be better at listening to my own internal monologue.
Right. Okay. Well, Janice, I really appreciate you being here. I think we'll end with that, and I'm sure we'll catch up another time in the
I love
future.
it. Well, and thanks for all you're doing, and thanks to all the creators on TikTok who are talking Alberta politics. My running joke is that I really want to be better at TikTok and even just social media, trying to get my message out. But often run out of time. So when I can amplify you folks, and I just really, really appreciate that. And so thanks everybody, and for anybody watching who does want to get involved. Even if I'm not your MLA, you can reach out and I can connect you with someone locally, because we can do this. A better future is closer than it's ever been.